in the spirit, fullest control. Confident living, right.
Life is the result of choices. We all make choices every day. We have a choice about whether we feel happy, whether we feel empowered, whether we feel that we're directed and have the knowledge of life, or whether we feel that outward influences and experiences are truly directing our entire life. Life is a choice, and the choices that you make and the choices that I make determine whether or not we possess our lives. If the things outside of you are possessing your life, then the real problem is outside, and that problem is totally out of your control. You don't know how people are going to react, what they're going to say, how they're going to behave. You don't know that your home is going to be peaceful tomorrow. You don't know that your job is secure. All of those things are variables, and we're all subject to them. But if we know within ourselves that we have the power to control the circumstances and situations of our mind, we control the way that we react to the things that happen to us. You might say, well, wait just a minute. You're talking about the fact that things don't really matter, and indeed they do matter. Maybe you've lost a job. Maybe you don't have enough money to meet your obligations. Maybe your personal relationship and family relationship isn't what you would want it to be. But you have a choice in all of those matters. You have a choice in terms of how you feel and what happens in the dynamic of your mind. We live in our minds and not in the world. The experience outside is a reflection of what's going on inside you. If you're going to repossess your life, and we all want to have possession of our being and participate in our life, we need to accept the fact that we are where we are, and all of life is the result of our own choices. We choose how we feel, how we respond, and how we react. And in that choice, the dynamic of our mind creates the world in which we live. We need to accept responsibility for our past choices. Maybe the choices that you've made in the past in terms of the way that you've responded to life's challenges, to life's difficulties, and life's joys haven't been the best. We all need to examine how it is we respond to a circumstance or situation. If you're placed in the situation of losing your job, it is your choice to decide how you're going to react to that in mind. No one is happy at the onset of such a situation, but it is whether you believe that you have control over your ability to seek another job, whether you have faith in your ability to get another job, or whether you believe you are totally at the mercy of the circumstance and situation that's taking place. Accepting responsibility for past life choices is absolutely imperative. If we live in our minds, we always have a choice. We can choose to accept happiness and the belief that we are going to be empowered or directed, or we can have the thought that the outward experiences of life are controlling what's going on in our lives. The choice is always ours, and it is only through the understanding of the dynamic of mind that we can repossess and become the co-creators that we need to be in our daily lives. I don't know what difficulty you face today. I don't know whether you feel particularly at this point that you don't have control of your life, that you are not in possession of it. But I do know that if you face that kind of a situation, or if you face that in the future, or if you have in the past, that by directing the way that your mind responds to these circumstances and situations, you can open a magnificent channel that will guide and direct you in wonderful ways. We believe in the infinite power of divine intelligence. Divine intelligence to us is the presence of God mind, the presence of the Spirit of God. And we believe that divine intelligence has the connective power to touch your intelligence, your consciousness, and your mind, mine and everyone else's on planet Earth. When that divine intelligence connects with our human intelligence, then all of the circumstances and situations of life can be dealt with. And we have a choice to make as we deal with them in the way that our mind reacts and responds. Christ Jesus, the great way shower, was a magnificent example of this dynamic of repossessing life. He was in constant possession of how he felt about the circumstances and situations of his life. From Bethlehem to Calvary and everywhere in between, His life experiences brought to him challenge and difficulty, joy and happiness, brought to him a circle of friends who were faithful, and in other situations, times when he was utterly alone. From Gethsemane to the Last Supper, he was faced with challenge, he was faced with difficulty, and he was faced with perplexing outward experiences. But his centering intelligence, his connection with divine mind, was always that he would be guided and directed, that he would be sustained, and that the way would be shown. He made a choice. He made a conscious choice to choose how he would feel about every circumstance and situation. We have the same ability. In our lives, we need to accept responsibility for the fact that our life is the way that it is, and that's what we have to deal with in mind. And in mind, we will be directed to the outward experiences. If you lost that job, it is through the connection with divine intelligence, the belief that it is there, the presence of God is within you, that you will be guided and directed to where you should go, what you should do, how it is you will be led into a new situation, a new job. The same thing in a relationship, the same thing with finances or health. It is our belief that there is a connection that creates for us the ability to deal with all circumstances and situations. Sometimes we think of the fact that the choices of our lives have to be big ones in order to really be monumental or make an impression upon our life. But really, the way that we think in little bits and pieces determines the dynamic of our entire life. We need to choose the experience of happiness. We need to choose the experience of claiming the fact that regardless of what happens in our outer lives, that on the inner, we will be able to deal with it because we will be guided and directed. We begin that process through small changes in the way that we think. Each time that you're challenged in small ways of your life, I invite you to choose to know that the negative influence, the problem, the circumstance that you're dealing with is a transient experience of life, and that you have the choice to be happy even in the midst of a circumstance that seems hopeless, in a circumstance that normally you would believe to have a very negative or oppressed feeling. Repossess your life by changing the way that you think. Change the way that you think by working through the process of changing the way that you respond to the external influences in life. And as you change that way that you think about the life experiences, you begin to repossess your life. And repossessing our life unifies us with the divine power of this universe and brings us into a greater and clearer understanding of who and what we are as children of God. It empowers us, and it allows us to be co-creators with infinite intelligence in our daily lives. We believe in prayer, and prayer is a major part of the ministry of our church and our fellowship. And we'd like to invite you at this point in the program to pause for just a moment of reflection, meditation, and prayer. Eternal God, we gather together as your children, aware of your divine presence. We ask that you would make us infinitely aware of our responsibility to accept the responsibility of our past choices, to accept responsibility for our lives, and together with you to make a decision to repossess our lives for that which is divine within us. We know, ask, and pray these things in the name of faith, in the name of hope, in the name of love. Amen.
That's a wonderful subject, Michael, repossessing our lives. It has such a good ring.
Repossessing our lives, it sounds like a car.
Right. Well, that's something we all need to give thought to, of how we can regroup, how we can repossess. And the problem is, most people, if they're in the position where they need to regroup, repossess their lives, they don't quite know how to go about doing it. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the pointers you would give along that line?
Well, I think the beginning point is to understand and claim the reality that in order to repossess our lives, we need to accept responsibility for the choices that we've made. And the choices don't have so much to do with the external choices of where we live or where we work, but they have to do with the choices we make about our mind action and what happens in us and the way that we respond to circumstances and situations. So I think that's the beginning point.
There's the key. It's how we respond to circumstances. And when people are in poor health, they don't respond in the same way they do when they're not. As people get older, they get nervous and more flighty about making decisions, and it's harder to make hard decisions. And if we could just give them a 1, 2, 3, it would be quite easy, but I know that's not that simple.
I think it is simple from the perspective of taking responsibility for the way that life is. And the way that life is in the external, and I think we're talking about two different kinds of life. We're talking about life on the inner, inside us, in our mind and heart, and we're talking about life in the external, outside of us. And the choices that we have really are choices inside. And we can't be dependent upon things outside to make us happy, but we're dependent upon the choices that we make inside to sustain us in the outward experiences. The person that you were talking about that perhaps has an illness, or perhaps is faced with the situation of aging and debilitation and limit, or the person who doesn't have enough money, for instance, in the outer life. The response that we have on the inner realm of our being and in our mind really determines whether we possess our lives or we don't possess our lives. And that's how we feel about it. We all know people who are sick at different points in time, and somehow the sickness doesn't touch them because inside they know that they're whole and well, and they know that they will be healed, if not in the external life, that they're healed internally, and then the illness doesn't touch them. The same with poverty. Poverty or lack in the external life doesn't have to touch us on the inner, and if the inner is prosperous and has a consciousness and awareness of prosperity and that connectiveness with divine intelligence, then it's going to create in the outer an outer experience. But it could be that the outer experience is going to be a life of poverty for some time, because that's the experience of life that we need at the moment.
And that we've merited and brought to ourselves. We've said so often we're living in the time of greatest change the world has ever known, and indeed we seem to be, and that creates more chaos and more a different vibratory rate in the atmosphere, I think. It makes it easier, people are more susceptible to those changing rates, vibratory rates, and so it's harder for people to stay centered. I call it staying centered. If I'm centered, it means I'm able to do what you said, repossess my life and live in that modality. But it's easier said than done.
Absolutely. It's easier said than done, but it is possible. And I think that the changes, the monumental changes that we have in life today are exactly what we need to prepare us for the time into which we're moving, which is a new age of enlightenment into a new century. And I think that God, in His infinite wisdom, is bringing and allowing to be brought this chaotic time and the tumultuous times in which we have, so that we can become spiritual giants, which is what we really are. We'll have more opportunity to repossess our lives.
Yes, and we're more able to tune in to the infinite, to be more spiritually oriented when we go through great change. And I know when people have gone through, in the counseling work that you've done and that I've done, I'm sure you've seen, as I have, that when people have gone through great stressful situations, it opens up their psychic centers very often. They might even become temporarily clairvoyant, if not on a permanent basis. I've seen that happen where they're able to see more clearly. And if we can look at the stresses that life offers us in that way, that it's a stepping stone to a step upward, then it makes it easier to bear, as opposed to just thinking, oh, this is hard to bear. Mm-hmm. If we know there's something more, like the rainbow at the end of the end of the cloud.
Mm-hmm. Well, we know that life is a school for the soul.
Yeah.
And so we're learning the lessons that we need to learn. And one of the lessons that we need to learn is to accept change and to accept the circumstances of our life and to be able to deal with them inwardly in a positive and wonderful way.
Well, I think in order to accept change, we have to, again, stay centered, and whatever our religious belief, whatever our persuasion in that way, it's staying into a meditative state and being in that state from time to time deliberately. We have to do it deliberately. And, well, to me, that's the way I've managed to get through the day, is just to tune into God often. And again, it's all easier said than done.
But as you are faced with challenges, and all of us are faced with life challenges, you go within because
Yes.
you know that technique.
Yes.
And you know that it works and you're
Yes.
able to create that dynamic in your life. But so many people don't know that. And going back to the issue of counseling so many people, you and I know well that many times we counsel people who simply are in the midst of a horrible, terrible situation, but their mind is so cluttered.
Yes.
And they're so far from the centering peace and presence of God and that connectiveness with divine intelligence that they simply have to endure what they have to endure until they are guided and directed to that centering place and to that presence. It's a little bit like the kind of situation that we see with dealing with people with substance abuse problems and alcoholics. It is necessary in some cases for people to get to the very bottom,
Yes.
for them to be deeply enmeshed in what they are in order for them to know that they have to begin a process of changing the way that they think. And of course, that's the process of addiction recovery, and it is the process also of the lack of possession of our lives that we have. So.
And chaos breeds chaos. The more chaotically they think, the more chaos exists in their lives. And so, or our lives, as the case may be.
And that chaos isn't anything to be afraid of.
Yeah.
And the chaos actually is an opportunity for us to exhibit the dynamic of our spiritual strength. And I think that those people who are centered, as you are, as I am, as many other people are, when we come to points of trial and difficulty, and we go to that centering presence, we believe and we know that we can go to that place. And so as many times as the negative experiences come to us, we're able to go within, seek the divine presence and that connectiveness with divine mind, and know that we'll be guided and directed. And perhaps the situation will change in the outer, perhaps it will not, but the way that we respond to it. So I think there are a huge number of people who are becoming very comfortable with chaos and becoming better with change. And if we can become good stewards of chaos and good stewards of change, then I think we become the spiritual warriors that we all want to become.
Yes. It's that inner knowing that attunes us to what we're seeking. There's so much going on in the way of talking about angels. And I heard that there was something on the television, there was something in the LA Times, there was something in so many different publications about angels appearing to people. And I believe one reason for that is a part of it might be people's imagination. Whatever it is, they seem to be appearing to more people. And it's because we're looking for, humanity as a whole, I think, is looking for higher help, for help from the inner planes. And if angels help us, then that's wonderful.
We believe, of course, angels are symbolic of the messengers of God.
Yes.
That they bring to us messages, they bring to us guidance, direction,
Yeah.
protection, and that they are real spiritual beings. But I think that whether people believe in them or not, the awareness and the thought of angels creates in us a connectiveness to that which is divine. And I think it spurs for many people just what they need to believe that they can deal with the situation. The television programs that outline the apparition and participation of angels in human life, in ordinary life, always portray times when angels touch into somebody at a point of great need.
Yeah.
And I think other people can relate to that beautifully, and that those angels, just as in Scripture, create for us a wonderful bridge between the physical life and the spiritual life, and invite us to believe that that bridge exists, and that if we connect with it, we'll be able to deal with whatever happens in our lives.
You've probably heard the same stories I have about the man riding on the freeway and the police pulled him over because he was driving erratically, and the driver said, you wouldn't believe why I was driving erratically. There was an angel sitting beside me. And the policeman said, yes, and he says, I would believe it because 4 other people have said the same thing. And they said, July 16th or a certain date, you will be safe. And then it happened in San Francisco that another series of events happened, and the angel supposedly told each of those 6 people in that case who had the identical situation, except the angel has supposedly said the trumpet will sound at a specific date. And then another lady had the same thing happen, and she was told the trumpet will sound at a different date. So how do you account for all of that?
Well, I think just what we were speaking about a few minutes ago, the true divine presence is always with us.
Yes.
And whether or not there is more connectiveness through angelic beings or presence is an object of debate. I like to think that the angels have always been here, and that our perception is getting so much better that we're seeing them and that we're perceiving them better. But I believe that it is a combination of our desire to have a connectiveness to that which is divine, and the invisible side of life becoming more visible to us. And that's really what's happening if you really consider the fact that some of these people are religious people, some of them are religious in a very fundamental way, others are peripherally interested in religion, and some not at all. And I think that that tells us that people across the board, regardless of their belief system, are reaching out to the perception of that which is divine, and that which is divine is touching into the hearts and minds of humankind. And so I think they've always been there, and I think maybe they're speaking more loudly. Yeah.
Good, good. So these people might be repossessing their lives, those who have seen angels, and it might be helping them in more ways than we could imagine to regroup and repossess.
I think we could gain a lot by going back to the kind of fundamental teachings that many of us had in terms of guardian angels,
Yes.
and claim that reality, because it is real, that there are angelic presences around us, always guiding and directing us. But beyond that, that those angelic that angelic presence is connecting us to that which is divine, to God, if you will, or infinite intelligence. And that connectiveness is just a wonderful thing that is allowing us to repossess our lives. And again, it doesn't matter what's happening outside. If you go back to the biblical scene in the Gospel of Luke in terms of the Nativity, it wasn't that it was going to be such a great thing, although it certainly was that Christ Jesus was born, but it was that those angels proclaimed the fact that there was going to be a monumental change, and that monumental change really came in a spiritual awareness. And it wasn't so important what he did in the outer life as what he did and taught on the inner life. And all of his outer experiences spoke to the spiritual indwelling presence.
Very good. Well, I know at one time I was at a crisis time in my life. I was thinking, when I was first married, I was thinking, can I stay married to this man? And I was going through a lot of problems, and my guardian angel appeared to me, and I feel sure that's who it was. And she looked like a peach-colored light. And she told me that this man is the perfect husband for my soul's growth. And so I think that's somewhat like you were just describing. We're in a time of crisis, and we see a guardian, and whether or not that was my guardian would somewhat be irrelevant. To me, she was real. To me, she gave a message, a very vital message, and I continued with my marriage with no thought of stopping it, because my guardian had spoken to me.
And that experience that you just spoke about is just a dynamic of demonstrating how you can repossess your life.
Yes.
Because you were at a point in time where you felt that you did not have possession
Yes.
of control in a positive sense. And in reality, that angelic presence or that divine speech to you, that connectiveness, gave you the faith to believe that you were in control. Maybe not the way you wanted to be.
Well, actually, it didn't matter what I wanted. I was asking God for help and guidance. And so that's the way I received the help and guidance. So you're right. That's a very good example of what your subject for today. That if we look to the inner for guidance, we'll get it.
Exactly right. It's what's happening inside us and the way that we respond inside to what's happening outside.
Yes. So the lesson is to look within.
To look within.
To look for God, to God the whole, for guidance, and know that we will receive it. Whatsoever you shall ask in prayer, believing you shall receive, and know that we will receive it, regardless of what our religious persuasion or place in life, just to look to that inner.
Absolutely right. The things, the dynamics and principles that we're talking about transcend all religious and denominational backgrounds and really speak to the fact that God in us empowers and strengthens us, and that we need to accept responsibility for where we are, and we need to claim the presence of God in our lives. And it's through claiming that presence that we can be strengthened and empowered in our daily life. And that is the confident living idea that we've shared with you today, that you can repossess your life, that there are angelic presences, that which is divine, surrounding you and me and all of us. And so Reverend Freelander and I have been delighted to share these ideas with you.
Confident living, banner of might, comes from the Spirit with glorious light. Confident living cleanses my soul, giving the Spirit fullest control. Confident living rights every wrong. Dynamic power helps me be strong. Confident living comforts my heart. From such a blessing I can't depart. Confident living helps me expand visions of value, the kingdom at hand. Confident living, talent to win, gift of the Spirit moves from within.